Okay, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. I hope it's good to be where you are because it is good to be here. My name is Baltimore Fats, and this is the continuation of Mud City. All right, see, I'm getting better at that, I think. I don't know. So I'm going to start off today. First off, I hope everybody's well today. Um, I'm getting a little bit under the weather. I've been attacked by Captain Tripp's weaker cousin, Corporal Strep, and so I'm a little bit under the weather. But I'm going to try to put out a couple videos this week and then take a break for the holidays and then come back. So I wanted to do a quick recap here just to sort of get up to speed. And so here's where we are so far. So when I started this journey that I'm on um, for Baltimore here, it started as a journey to just make the connections that I see around Baltimore City to the mud flood event and reset cities and perhaps Tartaria, that I was seeing around town, and I thought it would be a fun idea to just sort of chronicle some of Baltimore that and filter it through that lens. And so when I started this channel, I thought it would be a good idea to start here at Fort McHenry, very famous site in Baltimore. The national anthem was written about Fort McHenry. It's a star fort, as we can all see. And so I thought that would be a logical place to start. It's at the tip of a peninsula called Locust Point, and there's a long avenue called Fort Avenue where I see lots of sign of recovered buildings and property, at least, again, going through the sort of mud flood event filter. Um, and so I was going to do a walking tour of Fort Avenue, and I figured, of course, you have to start here. Uh, but when I was putting together that first presentation, I started to make connections between, there's a statue of a Greek god Orpheus on the property, which led to interesting connections. But, when I was doing my basic research on Fort McHenry, it stated that the United States Army Corps of Engineers refortified what was civilian-built earthworks in 1775, and the Army Corps of Engineers came in 1798 and put in some work and made it the Star Fort fortification that we see today. And I thought that was very interesting because I also noticed that there's still an an office of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on right next to Fort McHenry, right on Locust Point, and which brought to mind, so I was looking about this map. This is from 1851 of Baltimore City, and this is Locust Point. Here's Fort McHenry, and Fort Avenue goes all the way down, right? But I noticed these railroad tracks, and it started me thinking on a course of, what would you need to do if, the practical implications of digging a city out from under mud, and what would need to happen. And you need a way to get rid of a lot of that mud. And sure, you could do things like create brick with it and use it to create other earthwork or park, public parks and things like this. You could do things like that with it, but you would need to get rid of a lot of it. And so that started me off on a sort of a quest to investigate the B&O Railroad Museum. But that really wanted to bring me back further, and so I decided to start at the very beginning of the history of Maryland, which would be the exploration, the pre-colonial exploration era. And so what I found was that the crown at the time, right, there she is, look at her, through the House of Tudor and their Worm Knight leaders, and the Worm Knights are very important, as I'm finding, and I did get some information from a sub about how the root word, I believe it was, if my memory serves, for worm and dragon are the same, and so, I would think if I were a Worm Knight, I'd want to, the dragon's much cooler than being a worm. But anyway, so the House of Tudor and the crown through the house, first through the House of Tudor and then through the House of Stuart, who also have a worm knight, not the same helmet style, but one of those knights. And if you go to the New Earth channel, you can find a video of hers about the knights and perhaps the types of creatures that lived inside of them. So the Stuarts and the Tudors, or the crown there, using information provided by this guy who was a spy for both administrations. He worked under both of them, and he infiltrated the French, the Spanish, and the German, and the Germans were controlling Spain at the time, I believe, through the Habsburgs. Getting all of this information, the crown creates or authorizes the creation of trading companies. First, the East India Company, which they had been using to explore trade routes, allegedly trade routes in the Far East and through India and stuff. And then the London Company, which becomes the Virginia Company, to explore North America. All right. And in doing so, they find what they're looking for because, again, this sort of line of speculation that this story is taking me on has me saying they're not looking for trade routes or to create merchant colonies and plantations and stuff. What they're looking for is the evidence of this lost civilization that was covered over in the mud. And sure enough, Henry Hudson for the East India Company and John Smith for the Virginia Company coming up, they find the star forts and they find the remains, and using information also provided by other explorers, Francis Drake and the Portuguese and French explorers, all through ties of George Calvert, who is in deep undercover. I don't know if it's undercover or whatever, but he's in with the French and he's in with the Spanish and the Portuguese through the Germans. And so he has the information, and so the British Crown, working on that information, tries to stake their claim, and they want these star forts and the remains of whatever civilization is there. And so they send through the Calverts and other families like the O'Carroll family, who they sent to Baltimore, with agents like Charles Carroll, the settler, who is in tight with the Calverts and the Crown, and whose family was gifted 60,000 acres of Maryland land. And through Charles Carroll, the barrister, whose father, I believe, or grandfather, comes straight over from Ireland with grants of land through the Crown. And I started to realize that, maybe the whole story, and because there's information out there, research out there about the Civil War, and perhaps how the Civil War could be a cover story for the reclamation of, the cities lost in the mud flood. And so following this information, I started to realize that it seems to go back a little bit further, and that really where we might want to be looking is the Revolutionary War. And sure enough, if you follow these histories and you go through the loose history that I've laid out in my other videos, it becomes sort of apparent that the story, as I'm researching it, wants to flow through this place. And that this is the place where the Founding Fathers, through the influence of families like the Carroll family, perhaps staged what we know as the American Revolution, as a cover-up for essentially the setup of the United States Army Corps of Engineers and the uncovering of these cities and the repopulation that they know is going to happen, that's coming down the line. And so I've caught up through the Carrolls and the Tillman family, and their relation to the Founding Fathers. And so now we're going to go to Charles Carroll of Carrollton, and from here I'm going to move on into get a little bit away from Baltimore and get into the continental, I believe the Continental Congresses, and really how they did it, and this guy is a major player, if not the most major player in the Revolutionary War, and I'm going to try to explain a little bit about why right now, and then close out the Carrolls and move on into that connection with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the railroad and the actual digging out of the dirt and what was really happening. So hopefully that serves as a good catch-up. And here we go. We're going to go with Charles Carroll of Carrollton. All right, he was a wealthy planter. His grandfather was Charles the Settler, whose was granted, whose family was granted huge tracts of land in Maryland, right? And he was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and he was a part of the early Continental Congresses. But it gets much deeper. He was the sole Catholic signer of the Declaration of Independence. And I haven't really touched on the importance of Catholicism yet in Maryland, but it is very important because they do touch on it. The Carrolls and the Calverts were predominantly Catholic, but at the time it was not cool to be Catholic. And there was a Protestant Reformation in England where the Catholics lost control of the crown. And, so it really wasn't good to be a Catholic at the time. But, the Carrolls and the Calverts didn't really seem to care about that. And I'm going to demonstrate why, maybe a little bit here, but getting on further, because there's more Carrolls than just the Charleses, and there are just too many Charleses. But anyway, so they call him as a contemporary of the founding fathers. They called him the first citizen of the American colonies, and he used that pseudonym because he wrote editorials in the Maryland Gazette, right? And he was the longest lived signer of the Declaration of Independence, right? And he possessed the highest formal education of all the signers. Who's the top dog? He is. Top dog, the most educated, the richest. Do they say where is he? His personal fortune at the time was reputed to be 2.1 million pounds sterling, the equivalent of almost $500 million in 2018. He was the wealthiest man in the American colonies. Yeah, wealthiest man in the American colonies. Let's get into. We're going to talk about. He doesn't have a vested interest in anything, right? He doesn't. You want to protect his vast fortune, the richest person on the American continent at the time of the American Revolution. Never hear his name, do you? He's not. It's crazy, right? So anyway, it says he's the product of a 17-year Jesuit education in France. In France. Jesuit. See, this is the first time that the Jesuit name has come up. And again, just as also as a basic, a little bit of understanding of what I'm trying to do here is I'm just having a lot of fun, and I'm trying to use Wikipedia as my main source because it is the encyclopedia du jour. It is the main encyclopedia of the internet, right? And so this is just fun, basic information that they provide to us. This is what they're okay with us knowing, and kind of part of their indoctrination tool. So I'm trying to use that against them as best I can, I guess, right? So I'm not going to get all into the Jesuits right now because there's going to be time for that later. But 17 years learning in France under the Jesuits, right? And again, it's also kind of important that this is the first time the Jesuit name comes up because the other Catholics, pardon me, the Carrolls and the Calverts, you have, just guilt by association. Catholicism and the Jesuit order, the Society of Jesus here, hand in hand, right? Of course. So, you have to think that they were Jesuits as well, but it's interesting that the writers of Wikipedia never thought to link the Jesuits with those important Catholics who were settling America. Charles Carroll of Carrollton, the signer, he's the first one, right? And so I think that's really important. He spent 17 years in France. Who owns more of North America than England? The French do, right? The Spanish and their German crown owns, South America, really, and Florida and things like that. Where the French had the Louisiana territory, which was massive. You have to understand that. I believe when it's Thomas Jefferson, right, in the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, if my basic history is correct, and the Louisiana Purchase from Napoleon doubled the size of the colonies, or what was America at the time, right? So Charles Carroll educated in France. Who else was educated in France? The settler was Charles Carroll's grandfather, right? Who else was over in France? Thomas Jefferson spent a lot of time in France. So thick as thieves they are, right? And they have the best interests of America at heart, or do they have their own best interests at heart? Are they loyal, at least through the Carrolls and the Calverts? Are they loyal to the crown? Where were they? The House of Stuart, right, and the House of Tudors. And they're worm knights because the Carrolls have the crown, the crest of the Carrolls, right? Their coat of arms also has the worm knight on it. You know, so excuse me. Um, Very, very interesting. So let's continue with him. I just realized I did not set my timer, so hopefully I don't go crazy forever with this. Um, so here we go. He was a member of the first Continental, not the first Continental Congress, but the Continental Congress that came after the second, that lasted through the Revolutionary War. All right, and he served in the Maryland State Center. See, he was sent on a diplomatic mission from Congress to Canada to support the French Canadians. Just perhaps to just check on things, how are things going up here, the recovery of the Star Forts. Our boys, the Calverts, they worked hard over in Newfoundland. You know, so they go on, and again at the beginning of the page, I just kind of give him a quick summation. Right, he comes out of retirement to help the founding of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, which again has ties possibly that go back to the East India and the London companies through, I believe, I haven't looked at his name in a while, I think it was Thomas Smith, right? And where he comes from, there's a railroad station on the property where he was born, so it's just crazy how these things go. So here's his ancestry, right? There's that Worm Knight helmet, and there's got to be a superhero Worm Knight out there. We have to get on that. Excuse me. I don't know, are these lions or griffins? I didn't blow that up well. My eyes can't see that well. So anyway, they go into the history of where his family comes from in Ireland and his early life. Privilege. This is his manor, right? That's where I don't know. I didn't get into that so much in my quick look at research earlier. So again, here we go. Educated at known as the Bohemian Manor, and I guess just for the efforts of time, I did do a little bit, and it's very fascinating. And I will once I get into I think it's his cousin, who becomes the first bishop of Maryland. That's where I'm going to get more into the religious aspect of it, because I believe that all of this was done to find things. They were looking for certain things. They knew stuff was over here. They knew the Star Forts were here, and they knew some of these other buildings were here. Perhaps the B&O Rail, what is Mount Clair Station, or what would become Mount Clair Station, the Basilica here in Baltimore, the first Catholic cathedral. They're looking for these types of things, and I'm going to get more into the religious aspect when I delve into his cousin. I think it was Daniel. I can't remember off the top of my head. So let's get into the American Revolution in this part. Like I said, why I believe that he's the one that does the major. Him, and there are others in corresponding cities that he didn't work alone. Obviously, there were other agents for other aspects of the crown's concerns. Through Boston and New York and Philadelphia and so forth, and down through Virginia and the American colonies, right? So they say he wasn't initially interested in politics. No, he didn't go and study law and over in France with the Jesuits for 17 years to not have an interest in politics, right? No, they taught him everything about the system, and they taught him everything they wanted him to do, right? So he engages in a series of debates in the Maryland Gazette about, the right of the colonies to control their taxation. Right, here we go. Problem. Let's create the problem. Because of course all of these lawyers are planters. They have these massive plantations, and so they want to control their right of taxation. They're creating the problem, which of course isn't a problem. because they're all chummy with everybody back in the crown. And the Carrolls go back and visit even the next family, the Hanovers, who are the crown family during the American Revolution. Thick as thieves. None of it smells right. None of it smells right. Benjamin Franklin goes over and spends 1750 to 1770 living in England, living in London, going to all of those law schools and learning all of that, and after founding his own school in Philadelphia, which to teach other, founding fathers, and the number of, delegates and signers and things like that that came out of the College of Philadelphia is just ridiculous. The whole thing was a scam. The whole thing was set up. It's unbelievable how they spun it. So he takes part in these debates, right? And they really fuel. These are in, when is it? In 1772, right? So the barrister is over there, I think, at this time. His cousin, Charles Carrollton's cousin, the barrister, is over there, whose property, I believe, was the way station, the house where all the secret dealings were made, where the artists were commissioned, paid for, and educated through the Carrolls and other rich worm farmer lawyers, to, perpetuate the illusion of the revolution, to set up this false republic and have it all channeled through their own interests and the interests of the crown, right? At least that's the way this story wants to read to me, perhaps why they never really teach this angle in major American history classes, at least in depth, because people might start making, people smarter than me, way, way smarter than me, because I'm so dumb. They would make these connections and make them much better than I would. So anyway, so he starts this campaign about this taxation, and he uses his debates against this guy who I've never looked up yet, Daniel Delaney the Younger. And so I'll have to see a planter. No, he's just a politician. He wrote something about considerations on the propriety of imposing taxes on the British colony. So the propriety, of course, is these rulers like the Calverts, the proprietors, the Penns in Pennsylvania, and whoever would be, I don't know who controlled New York and so on and so forth. But anyway, because again, I'm just trying to stay focused with Maryland. And so, that's how he starts. But, sooner following these written debates, he becomes a leading opponent of British rule. No, right? He plays an important role in the burning in Annapolis Harbor of the Peggy Stewart. So he's a terrorist, right? Or, a false flag artist. I mean, is this a false flag? Who knows? I don't know. I didn't research the burning of the ship or anything like that, but here's what happened. Just like the Boston Tea Party, they don't say anything about him dressing like Indians or anything. But as part of the Tea Party protests against the British, and the Tea Act, on October 19th of 1770, pardon me, they burned this boat in Annapolis Harbor. And so, because by the early 1770s, which also correspond with his publishing these debate letters in the Maryland Gazette, he embraced the idea that only violence could break the impasse. So he's promoting war now, openly, right? And according to legend, he and Samuel Chase, who had also signed the Declaration of Independence, and I haven't looked into him yet, but he, again, more lawyers from Maryland, send lawyers, guns, and money, right? But this exchange is kind of interesting, so Chase says, we have the better of our opponents. We have completely written them down, So again, I guess this means, I think that's interesting, completely written them down. We fabricated it all. We got it on paper, and so he says, do you think that writing will settle the question between us? Do you think that's it? And he says, to be sure, Chase says, what else can we resort to? And Carroll says, the bayonet. Our arguments will only raise the feelings of the people to that pitch when open war will be looked to as the arbiter of the dispute. interesting exchange. Does it say where that happened? No, but this is a legend. All right, so maybe this doesn't even exist on paper. It's just a legend. I'm not going to look at the footnote. Well, let's take a look. What does the footnote say? Well, give me a. I lost my cursor. There he is. Politically incorrect guide to the founding fathers. Okay, so I'll have to look that book up. I bet it's interesting. I bet there's some fun stuff in there, but not too fun. It doesn't say anything about the worm knights in that one, I bet. So huge, right? He's instigating war. He's calling for violence. Problem, reaction, solution, right? All the Carroll's doing, and I'm sure again there's Thomas Paine and there are others involved, but and I'm not looking that deep. I'm just trying to again. I hate to just repeat myself all the time, guys, but it's important. I do it for myself, believe me. You know, that so I'm only going through Baltimore and Maryland, or at least I'm doing my best to keep it, that focused, the focus of it there. All right, so he goes and he signs the Declaration of Independence, and he's a member of the Continental Congresses, which I'm going to get into because it's the Continental Congress that approves the formation of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, right? So we're going to go, so again, that's how he serves on all the Senates. Richest guy in America, right? Educated in France for 17 years, whose family, massive connections to the crown. Again, I don't see how he doesn't have a vested interest in the crown, in the royal families, and I don't see how, it makes good business sense for him to, oppose again. They set it up as the taxation. Oh, he's going to profit more, and these farmers are going to profit more by separating from the crown. I don't think so. I think they were charter families, the Carrolls and the Calverts, and their corresponding families in the other colonies. Are charter families contracted for other purposes and not to create trade routes or look for trade routes and create plantations and things like that. It was something else. They were looking for the star forts. They were looking for the remains of whatever that civilization that got covered in the mud. That's what I'm proposing through this speculative research. Okay, and so again, that's just he got all of his money through the crown. So why would he could he possibly be that greedy, already being the richest one? All right, so he retires after Thomas Jefferson becomes president. For whatever reason, he doesn't support the War of 1812. But I thought this was interesting. In 1828, he commissioned the Phoenix Shot Tower, which is today just called the Shot Tower. I've never heard it called the Phoenix before I saw this. Right, and so one of these days, Mud City's going to take me to the Shot Tower. It's a really cool building, and it's interesting that it ties into the Carrolls and the date of 1828. It makes me think that if it wasn't completely built already, the foundations of it were there and they just recovered and rebuilt it. So, he dies of apparent heart attack at 96. He's the longest lived, like I said. His funeral was at the Basilica, right? And he is buried at the Horrigan Manor. I wish I could read the Irish Gaelic or whatever that is. But that's his family home. He built it. He bequeaths it to his grandchildren, I think, one of his grandchildren. So this was interesting too. The Carroll funded the building of what is known today as the Homewood House, a 140-acre estate in North Baltimore, as a wedding gift for his son, right? And so I'm going to have to go here. It's on the Johns Hopkins University campus, right? And I'm going to look around there and see what I can find there because, again, just the history and the architecture of it. Okay, so chaos erupted around me and I had to cut the first take short and now just wrap it up quickly. So, yeah, I'm going to have to go visit that estate on Johns Hopkins. And But so I just wanted to wrap up with, how important Charles Carroll of Carrollton, the signer, was. I just named in his honor are counties in Arkansas, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Maryland, Mississippi, Missouri, New Hampshire, Ohio, and Virginia, as well as 2 Louisiana parishes, East and West Carroll. Carroll County, Kentucky, and its county seat, Carrollton, are both named for him. Also named for him are the Carroll Gardens neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York, and the greater Carrollwood neighborhoods of Tampa, Florida, as well as the New Carrollton, Maryland, home to Charles Carroll Middle School, and the town of Carroll, New York. Carroll University in Waukesha, Wisconsin, is named in his honor. In addition, Charles Carroll High School in the Port Richmond neighborhood of Philadelphia is named for Charles Carroll. Has anybody ever heard of this guy before? Good Lord. All over freaking America. I mean, how did this Baltimore guy, again, richest guy at that time, so under the radar, just in my estimation, I could be way wrong. Maybe everybody in the world knows about Charles Carroll of Carrollton, but to have so much stuff named after him is crazy. Let's see, how else do they honor him as he goes on? Catholic Total Abstinence Union fountain has a statue of him. Okay. Let's see. Fountain was commissioned and created by sculptor Harry. No, let's see. Come on, give me something else. There's got to be something. Let's see. The 4 other statues that make up the points of the Maltese cross are statues of Charles Carroll, Father Matthew, Commander John Barry, and Archbishop John Carroll, his cousin. All right, so 2 of the Carrolls are the cornerstones of the Maltese cross. That seems interesting. I wonder if I should follow up on that. Maryland, the state of Maryland added a bronze statue of Charles Carroll of Carrollton to the United States Capitol's National Statuary Hall collection. It is located in the crypt. Where is the crypt? What is this? The crypt has statues of important people. I'm gonna have to go to the crypt. I wonder if they'll let me in. University of Notre Dame constructed what is now known as Carroll Hall after him. So again, the Catholic ties, that's how important he was. Notre Dame. What? And St. John's College, William Paca, which is interesting, the William Paca, or that L. Gordon warehouse building that I did a video on is on Paca Street, named after him. So anyway, that's where I'm going to wrap up Charles Carroll of Carrollton, the signer, at least for today. There's always going to be more to get in because, like I said, I truly believe he was top dog. I mean, and so that's really interesting. And I wanted to close this video by, kind of paying it forward. I had a sub turn me on to the work of Michelle Gibson here, and she has like 40 some videos, and I've gone through about 8 or 10 of them, and she does have a series on the Silk Road, which I thought was interesting. And what she has done is she's using sacred geometry and has mapped out a tetrahedron on the North American continent, and she follows those lines and has established a pattern of this lost civilization, the one that the mud event movement calls Tartaria. She, I believe, has different theories about that. I haven't gotten that deep into her research yet, but I just, like I said, I wanted to pay it forward. I think, I see, the low viewer totals on some of her videos, and it boggles my mind, because when I say that I'm not real research, and I believe that there are other channels that are doing what I consider real research. She appears, at least on the surface to me, hi Michelle, to be doing, really, really good research, really hard work into her theory. And I've seen that she's gotten some support, a little bit of support from Conspiracy R Us and Colin Gibney. And they've commented on a couple of her videos, at least a couple of the ones that I've watched. And, I mean, I think her research could use a little more support. I think it's really interesting because it is the only lifeline that I've come across that makes me think of a globe, that the globe has any relevance anymore. I came to the Mud event through Flat Earth research. I presently believe that we do not know what the shape of our world is or how it is designed. I experience it as a plane, and so that's why I tend to go with the Flat Earth. But this research here, she uses these ley lines from this sacred tetrahedron she's laid out on the North American continent and followed it around the globe and made connections to major cities and similar architecture from alleged all time periods in our human history. And to me, it's very interesting, So I just wanted to give a shout out to her, pay it forward. I've gotten good support from channels, and so I want to, I'm gonna, support Michelle here a little bit, So good luck, Michelle, with your research. I'm digging it. I'm gonna be getting deeper, and so yeah. And so, in that spirit too, as well, if you guys are having fun with what I'm doing, and I had a lot of fun with the signer today, please like, share, and subscribe, and, thank you guys so much for watching, and until the next one, cheers, guys.